Are you ready for another story? I have a great story for you today. Our story today is about Daniel and the lion's den. It's a great story. It was one of my favorites when I was a kid. But before I tell you this story, you have to have the backstory, which means the story before this story, so you're not confused. Okay, so there was once this king. His name was King Nebuchadnezzar. And he was a good king. He had his flaws like most kings, but he was a pretty good king. And he met Daniel, which is our main character of the story today. And he met Daniel because he had a dream. He had a dream in the middle of the night, and he couldn't understand what it meant. He tried and he couldn't figure it out. He asked his wise men, he asked all of the people that were supposed to be really smart and know everything, and they prayed to all of their gods, like the sun god and the moon god and the earth god, which there isn't any of those. There's only one God, but they didn't know that. So they prayed to all of the gods, and they tried to figure out what it meant, and no one knew what it meant. No one could even tell him what the dream was that he dreamed. So then the king said, okay, either you find out what this dream means, or I'm going to kill all of you, all the wise men, all of your families, all the kids, the children, yourself. You're all going to die, all the wise men, if you can't tell me what this is. So all the wise men were really scared because they didn't know what the dream was. And so they all tried to figure it out. So then the captain of the guard went to Daniel one day and told him that he was going to be killed like in the next few days, and he told him why and everything. So Daniel asked him to go back to the king and tell him to wait. Like, hold on, wait a little bit. I'm going to pray to my God, and hopefully he'll tell me what it is. So Daniel prayed. And of course, God told him what the dream was and what the meaning was. So Daniel went back and he told the king, and everything was okay. Everything was cupcakes and rainbows after that. The king really loved Daniel, and they set him and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, above all the other men because they could tell you the dream when no one else could. So they were really good friends. He really liked Daniel. So that's King Nebuchadnezzar, okay? That's one king. And he died years later, and his son, King Belshazzar, he became the king as well. But he didn't know Daniel as well. He didn't know Daniel as much as his dad did. So here is when that story comes in with King Belshazzar.
This is King Belshazzar. He was having a party one day. They were all drinking out of the cups that his father had taken from the Jerusalem temple when he was king. When all of a sudden he saw something weird. He saw a random hand writing on the wall by itself. It wasn't attached to anything. It was just a random hand writing words on the wall. He didn't know what was happening. He'd never seen something like this before. He couldn't even read the words. He couldn't understand what they meant. What was that? Mean, tekel, upharshin? Mean, tekel, upharshin. He didn't know that language. He didn't know what that meant. So he called his wise men, and he asked them if they knew what it meant. And he asked everyone that he could think of. No one knew what these words meant. Finally, the queen said, "There's a man named Daniel that your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, used to know. He used his God to tell your father about a dream he had one day. And he could probably do that for you too." She asked, "Would you like me to go get him? Do you want me to see if he can tell you what this handwriting on the wall means?" And he said, "Yes, definitely. Go and get Daniel." So she brought Daniel to the king. And he knew the words. He knew the words because God told him what they meant. He told the king, "Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, forgot who ruled the kingdom, the one true God, the Most High God. So God took the kingdom from him. Now, you yourself have not humbled yourself to him. You act like this is all your kingdom when you know too that it's God's. But you drank from his holy vessels, and you praised other gods while doing it. You praised gods of the earth and all that. So he sent this writing to tell you that your days are numbered. that your kingdom is about to go to the Medes and to the Persians, and it won't be your kingdom anymore. That night, as Daniel said, the king was killed, and King Darius became the new king. Because Daniel was loyal and honest, they put him over all of the money, because they knew that he wouldn't steal it like some other men might. The other presidents and princes, they didn't like that very much. They didn't like how highly everyone thought Daniel was, so they spoke poorly about him. They talked bad about his behind his back. They tried to find something wrong with him, but he didn't do anything wrong. He was just an all-around good guy. He was friends with the king, which made them like him even less. The only thing they could do was try to trick Daniel, to try to figure out a way that he could do something wrong. But the only thing that Daniel did was he was so in love with his God, and he never broke the law of his God. So they used that to their advantage. They used that to try to get rid of Daniel. They thought of a way to get rid of him, and they made a law for the next 30 days that you could only pray to the king, or you could only ask something of the king instead of anyone else. And they told the king that everyone thought it was a great law. All the other princes and presidents, they thought it was a great law and that he should just sign it. And he didn't know that it was a trick, so he did. Daniel knew all about the law, but he went home and he prayed with the windows open. The princes and the presidents saw him and immediately took him to the king. The king was very upset, and he didn't know that this law would get Daniel in trouble. But after you signed a law back then, you couldn't change it. It was law. You couldn't change your mind. So he had to get Daniel in trouble. The law was broken. He couldn't do anything about it. So with this being all out of his control, he had to let them throw Daniel in the lion's den. He said, "I really hope and I pray that your God will save you in the lion's den, that you, when I come back in the morning, that you will be okay and nothing will happen to you." The king spent the whole night pacing, wide awake, unable to sleep. He was so worried for his friend that he was going to die in the lion's den, or that he was already dead. He didn't eat the whole night. He didn't let people play music for him, which was really big back then. People would come and play music to relax the king, and he felt so guilty that he said, no one can do that. First thing in the morning, he ran back out to the lion's den to check and see if Daniel was okay. He was fine. He said, "God sent an angel to shut the lion's mouth and to protect me." The king was so happy that Daniel was okay, but he threw the men who tricked him into the lion's den. Because they had tricked the king, they had used him to try to hurt his friend. The king made a new law after that day, that everyone had to worship Daniel's God, because Daniel's God had saved Daniel from the lion's den, and no other God had been able to do that. No other God could do that.
Well, welcome back. Did you enjoy the story? I told you it was a good one. Well, I hope you learned a lot about Daniel today, and a lot about how if you trust in God and you believe that everything's going to be okay, no matter what you go through, no matter if you get thrown in a lion's den, don't quit praying to God. Don't let other things seem more important. Daniel, he could have died, and he knew that. He knew that if I go and I continue to pray, if I open my window and everyone sees me praying, I can be killed. He knew about the law. That's what he did on purpose. He knew that he could be killed if someone saw him praying to someone other than the king. But he didn't care. It was more important to him that he continued praying to his God, the one true God, than to pray for some king. And he was right. You should do that. He was absolutely right. But just because you should do something doesn't necessarily mean it won't be hard. If it was you or me today, think about it. Okay, you stop praying to your God for 30 days, or we'll throw you in the lion's den to be eaten. It would be be kind of difficult to make that choice because honestly, your mind is thinking, well, I don't want to die. So you try not to. It's just instinct. But when you trust in God and you believe that everything works out the way that He wants it to, it'll all work out in the end. It'll be okay. But I hope you guys enjoyed this story about Daniel and the Lion's Den, and I hope to see you again soon. Come back and visit. Bye.